Hello, yes, that's right. It's Joe here for JOYRIDERTV, back live with some more Q&A. Hope everybody is having a lovely time so far. I know that if you're in certain parts of the world, you might have only just got out of bed. And if you're in other parts of the world, you might be just getting ready to go to bed. But anyway, this is a live Q&A session where I'm going to be answering your catamaran sailing questions. And if you are watching later on, then please do feel free to put any questions that you might have in the comments section, and I will get back to you in the next Q&A next Friday with those answers. We have got an absolute stack in the preloaded questions department because I didn't do the Q&A last week. So we've got plenty to be talking about today. Hello to everybody who is checking in. Hello to Joshua, to Joaquin, to Scott, dropping it in the slot, to Chris over in Texas, and to Richard. Hello, everybody. So I think we're going to steam straight in, and I'm going to steam straight in with Joshua's question, which is as follows. With all of your experience on the Hobie 16 Hobie Tiger with Spinnaker and Tornado with Spinnaker, I'm interested to hear your take on optimal downwind course for each of those boats and the differences. All right, so I'm just gonna have to think about this for a second. So if we're talking kind of, let's start off Hobie 16, 2 sails, optimum course, downwind. This is the easy place to start. There's the wind, as always, coming from the top. And then the Hobie 16's optimal course is 136 degrees. Now, we can tell when we're on the optimum course on a catamaran that has 2 sails by looking at our wind indicators, which are on the bridle wires or thereabouts, and they should be flying straight across the boat. So for those of you who haven't heard this before, sorry, I just need to just avoiding fiberglass splinters is very important in the workshop. So when we're sailing on 3 different winds, would you believe? The first one is the true wind, which is the wind that's blowing. So if we sailed past a flag, on like a flag on a buoy, perhaps like on a lobster pot or something, the flag would be blowing in the direction of the true winds. Also, if you're sailing on a lake or somewhere where the water isn't affected by tidal current, the waves would also be, or the chop would also be in the direction of the true wind. That is the wind that is blowing. So that is the true wind. The second wind that we're using that is influencing us is called the induced wind, and that's the wind that we're creating by moving forwards. If you've ever been in a car and you put your hand out of the window while it's going along, you could feel quite a lot of wind blowing directly onto your hand, and that is the induced wind. In a car doing 50 miles an hour, that's 50 miles an hour's worth of induced wind. So our induced wind is coming straight onto the nose, which means the wind that we're actually using when we sail is what we call the apparent wind, and that is a combination of these two winds, which on the downwind point of sail, 2 sails, the optimal is with the apparent wind coming side on to the boat. So that's why it's really important to have wind indicators on the boat. We just use bits of videotape here about yay long, about a foot long, tied onto the bridle wires, and that's a very cheap and effective way of knowing what the apparent wind is doing. The reason that 90 degrees apparent wind there is optimal is because that is as far downwind that we can sail while we're still getting airflow over both sides of the sails. So if we put, let's have sails in black here. I'll just have them, yeah. So when we go this deep downwind, we're still getting airflow over both sides of the sails. If we were to go any further downwind, we'd only get airflow in the inside of the sail, which means on the outside of the sail, we'd have a turbulent airflow, which the reason the catamaran rig is very efficient and fast is because we're getting this airflow over both sides of the sail. So there we go. That's the story for the Hobie 16 or any catamaran sailing with two sails. Hello, I'm drinking out of a mug with bikes on it. This was given to me by Hanny. Thank you very much. Lovely. All right, so the next part of the story is, and to be honest, it is the same for most catamarans with the Spinnaker. So whether it's the Tiger, whether it's the Tornado, any other F18, F16, basically anything that's not foiling. Let's not even go there with the foiling. What we're going to be doing with the Spinnaker up is we're going to be sailing further, deeper downwind. And this is not really a quantifiable angle that we're going to be sailing in. What we're trying to do on the downwind with the Spinnaker is we're having a way up between direction and speed. This is what we call optimal VMG, velocity made good. So with the Spinnaker up, because the Spinnaker is delivering so much juice and making the boat go a lot faster for that point of sail, that actually means we're going to be sailing deeper downwind because our induced wind has become much more. True wind could be the same, but our induced wind is much more, which means that we can sail deeper downwind, and that is optimal. Now, how do you judge what is optimal? There's different modes that we could sail the boat in. So if we zoom in, large size. So mode 1 would be for really light winds when there's not really much of a chance of lifting the hull, or perhaps just in the gusts you might be able to, where the helm, the people will be indicated with circles. The helm will be in towards the mast, the crew over on the leeward side. Always the helm and crew at similar distance forwards and backwards, fore and aft, because as we separate the helm and crew, the boat rocks more and you'll get a lot more of a pitching motion. So that would be super light wind. As the wind picks up, then this is going to be in green. The helm might move slightly more outboard, crew directly opposite. The reason we're moving back, as well as avoiding sticking the nose in, is so that we've got more control of the steering. Because what is very important with the Spinnaker up is that when it's windy enough to lift the hull, you want to very much be in control of the steering, because it's the steering that is going to stop you from capsizing. All right, so by moving back, the angle to your tiller extension is much more over this way, whereas when we're right at the front, your tiller extension's almost straight in line, which means you've got very little leverage on the rudders. So that is why we would move back, as well as to keep the boat trimmed nicely. And then as the wind increases further, we'll then go both on the windward side like this. And then the final step is, of course, for the helm was stay in the same spot, crew out on the trapeze, and then moving forwards and backwards to keep the boat really level in the water without ever risking putting the deck under. So that is a quick story of crew positions on the downwind, our optimal VMG on the downwind course, and stuff like that. So there we go. And it is very similar for all of the different boats. Perhaps the Tornado, because it has got a better power to weight ratio than the F18. You're going to go deeper in less wind than the F18, but all of the theory is exactly the same. All right, so Joachim says, still on the topic of the Spinnaker, he says, do you lubricate your ring, the opening of the Spinnaker chute? I've got one just here, just in case you're not sure what we're talking about. Okay, so this is what a typical Spinnaker ring looks like. It's usually plastic, and the Spinnaker will go in through here. Do we lubricate these? Not on the Wildwind Beach, but we don't have any problems with the Spinnaker going up and down. Now, Joachim says he's already got it tight, so there's no creases, but he's getting quite a lot of friction. I would firstly, if there's a lot of friction, places where we could look is look at all of the blocks, the pulleys that might be influencing the running of the halyard, the retrieval line, and the tack line. Is your Spinnaker halyard too short? It should have, when it's up, just a little bit of slack on the trampoline. If it's bar tight between the rope and the elastic that holds it in position, that's going to make it more difficult dropping the Spinnaker. What else might make it more difficult? Is your Spinnaker pretty clean? If it's gathered salt over the years, it's going to be a lot more chunky, let's say, and it's going to be more difficult to drop. But if I'm going to a race with my own boat, yes, I might get a bit of silicone spray and just literally just spray around the inside of the hoop there, just to allow it to go in and out a little bit more. But of course, being very careful to not get any on the retrieval line itself, because you don't want a slippery retrieval line. Oh no. Oh no. All right. So back to the live chat. Here we are. All right. Scott is in McCall, Idaho this week. Are there any Hobie sailors, Scott says, going out on Payette or Cascade Lakes? If you are, put it in the live chat, or if you're not watching live, if you're watching later on, put it in the comments and Scott will get in touch if you're up, Scott, to go for a sail with you. He's been touring the US, sailing with various people. Scott is a good sailor. All right, Richard says hi. We got Greg on board in Houston, Texas. It's got Hobie Miracle 20. Now, you may think you're ripping through this pretty quick today. Well, that is true. It's because we've got a lot to go through, and that is the truth. All right, we've got Tor from Michigan. Great to have you on board. Dave's on board. Lake Lanier, Georgia, Hobie 16 amateur hour. Why do people look down on Abba so much? Now, I don't think that they do. Abba, of course, one of the most famous exports from Sweden. Very good band producing very catchy pop tunes. I don't think people look down on Abba as much as you think. I think Dave just feels a little bit guilty when he's in his front room dancing to Abba. Han is on board. Hello, Han. I believe you're joining us here at Wildwind Sailing Holidays tomorrow. Han, of course, famous for the Dart 18 toe strap ejector seat. Looking forward to seeing you out here. We've got Patrick on board in southern, is that Illinois, I believe. All right, we got Mike Quee. Oh, it's Quaify. That's Matty Quaif, who used to work on the Wildwind Beach, who's in Hong Kong, and he's coming here for a few beers and some reaching fun in a few weeks. Great stuff. All right, so we got the Mac the Knack Daddy. He's tuned in. All right, hold on in answer to what's coming here. I'm sure everybody will have already seen the film that went out yesterday, which was, I think the headline was, I wasn't expecting that, and neither would you. He says, so the jib shackle that you broke isn't the stock quick connect version as supplied by Hobie. It appears to be a 1/4-inch Ronstand forged bow shackle with braking strength. Wow, there's some numbers there of £3,900. Yeah, it is exactly this 2-part shackle. It is what we call these in Europe is the Ronstand 4mm, which I'm sure is exactly the same as what you're talking about. On all of the European Hobie 16s, these are supplied as standard by Hobie. But this one has seen plenty of action, which is the only way, the only reason why it would have broken. So I would recommend, as well as replacing your rigging every 3 years, maybe think about replacing your shackles maybe every 10 years. I think that would do you. All right, we got Tim in Oregon. Hi, Tim. Great to have you on board. Lee's on board, I think, in Macon, I believe my memory serves me correctly. All right. So Joshua says, great question on the Spinnaker. Can you name the most common issues that cause the Spinnaker to have too much tension when losing and raising? Yeah, I think I might have just said that in response to Joaquin's question. Yeah, so I'm pretty happy that we've already talked about that. All right. So we've got Chad from Michigan on board as well. Hi, Chad. We've got Nick in Ohio. Everybody is here today. Thanks for tuning in. We've got I Love Windex. I'm doing very well, thank you. I believe I Love Windex is a first-time caller in the Q&A because that is certainly a YouTube user handle that I would have remembered. All right, I'm just going to go on to my first preloaded question because, as I mentioned, we have got quite a few to look at today. So the first one, and this one is from Black Sheep on Patreon. By the way, if you subscribe to Joyrider TV on Patreon and you've got preloaded questions that you get to go to the top of the queue if you're on Patreon. There we go. Support Joyrider TV on Patreon. Thank you very much. All right. So he asks, how did you go? All right. So he says, how did you go about breaking so many Hobie 16 rudder blades to have to ban yourself from sailing Hobie 16s? Was it a flaw or were you just giving it the beans? Okay, so those of you who don't know the story, I had to ban myself from sailing Hobie 16s here for about 10 years because I was snapping pretty much one rudder blade every 10 days on average. And these were, I've got one here. The White Knight rudder blades, which are the they were the popular carbon reinforced rudder blades, and unfortunately for us, where we're doing a lot of sailing on the beam reach, broad reach, double trapezing, where we're really loading the blades up with pressure, what was happening is this joint down the front where the two halves are stuck together was breaking, and if that joint down the front edge breaks, and the two halves are no longer one piece effectively, so as two halves, as one piece, the rudder blade is really stiff, but once that's split, it bends very easily, and as it bends more and more, eventually it's going to snap. And a lot of the time the blades would separate, and then before you even knew it, it snapped straight away because we're loading them up so much. And yes, it's because I was putting so much pressure through the rudders by giving it so much juice on those reaches. And in fact, this one we can see is really this. So this blade is finished. Once a blade has started cracking like that, you could only ever use it again for sailing in like non-trapezing conditions, because as soon as you start loading them up, then it's just going to snap in half. Then the thing that allowed me to come out of Hobie 6 retirement, can anybody guess what it's going to be? Yes, it's the EPO 3 rudder blade. Before these bad boys came out, it was quite a despairing time, just like, how can we solve this problem? It wasn't just me snapping the blades as well. It was a lot of sailors who were giving it some serious beans on the reaches were snapping rudder blades. Hobie Cat Europe were really good about it, and they did give us warranty on all of the rudder blades that we were snapping, because we're of course having to buy new ones to replace them. I'd note down all the serial numbers of the rudder blades, and if one of the new ones snapped, they'd replace those broken ones for new ones again. So we went through so many blades, and then the EPO 3 came along, and in the last 6 or so years that we've been running EPO 3s on all of our Hobie 16s, we haven't broken any at all. But before you start rushing out to buy some, they are fiercely expensive. In Europe, I think an EPO 3 rudder blade probably costs something like €500 for one. But are they worth it? Yes, they are that strong that they are worth it if you're going to be giving it a lot of juice, and if there are other things that are more worthwhile replacing on your 16 first. All right, so Nick F was straight in there and he said EPOs. Yes, you're right, Nick. Scott dropping it in is his EPO 3s have arrived yesterday. Now, the EPO 3s in the USA, when you buy them, come not drilled. So when you've got these brand new, shiny, remarkably expensive rudders that just arrive in the post, you then have to take a drill and drill your own holes in them, where you'll put the insert for the bolt that goes through. Nerve-wracking time for Scott there. All right. So I'm just going to do the next preloaded question, then I'll come back to Joshua's question about the self-tacking jib. All right, so off we go. This one's from Chris, also on Patreon, I think, which is why it's at the top of the list. So Patreon, everybody. Chris says he's intending to sail with his family of 5. Kids are 4, 7 and 10 years old, and altogether weighing in at 235 kilograms, which Antonio will say what that is in pounds. Quite a lot. Quite a lot of pounds. 235 kg, which is it 500? 518. That's 518 pounds. Is it too much for a Hobie 16? 518 pounds. Generally speaking, I would definitely say there are other boats out. If you don't already, so I didn't get this from Chris, whether he's already got the 16 that he's going to be sailing on. But generally, yes, it is a bit too much weight to be putting on the boat if you're looking to be getting decent performance out of the boat. But if you're going out with the family and you just want to have a lovely time, just cruising along, not necessarily breaking any records or winning any races, then yeah, we do it a lot here at Wildwind, where we have some big guys sailing Hobie 16s. Perhaps the most would be a little bit less, but you can still sail a 16 with that much weight. But the reason Hobie Cat brought out the Hobie 18, the classic, was so that heavier sailors had more volume in the hulls. So if you were to have the choice of Hobie 16 or 18 for that much weight, I would say the 18 is definitely the choice because the hulls have got so much more volume. Just staying lubricated because we've got a lot to talk about. Oh yeah. So there we go. Thanks for the question there, Chris. Next question, and this is a juicy one. Wolf in Germany says, how come your maximum speed is always with the jib and mainsail on a 2-sail reach and never with the Spinnaker? Is the forward course never faster than the beam reach despite the Spinnaker? I ask because we have a new K2X with Spinnaker on our small lake in Germany trying to get top speed. Top speed so far 17.28. Nice. It seems as though with the boat I've already hit the spot. Yeah, so very interesting question there, Wolf. So usually the reason why you're not going to get the mega top speed with the Spinnaker is because the Spinnaker on most boats is a bit too full, which means it's got a lot of curve to it. Even when you sheet in, it's not kind of flat like that. It's going to be more like that, which means that all you can do with the Spinnaker when you start going fast is turning further and further downwind, which is going to, like, if you're sailing from here to here, it's going to get you to here quicker, but your straight line top speed isn't going to be as fast as you might be able to achieve without it. The time when you are going to be able to hit a higher speed with the Spinnaker or Gennaker, asymmetric Spinnaker, we're not going to get into that right now, so don't even think about it, is firstly, if you've got a very flat Spinnaker like a Code Zero, then that is going to, what you really want is a really big jib. So a very flat Spinnaker will have the same effect as a really big jib, and that is really going to give you a very high speed. The other time when you'll get a higher speed with the Spinnaker is in lighter winds. So in winds, I'd say up to about 20 knots, there is the possibility that you'll get a higher top speed with the Spinnaker up. Do you know what? I think I can feel a video coming on where I'll take one of the Spinnaker boats, maybe something juicy like the C2 or a Tornado, and we'll do a top speed comparison on the same day out with and without the Spinnaker and see what the numbers say. Yeah, but that is my general theory of getting the high speeds with or without the Spinnaker. It's because of the curve in the sail. That means you will get to a kind of top speed with the Spinnaker, and then you just have to keep going downwind more. Otherwise, it will just start flapping, or you'll start lifting the hull too much. And if you don't do something about it, you will capsize. There we go. All right. So I hope that answers the question. All right there, Wolf. But the reason, it's another reason why we're getting the big speeds on the Hobie 16, because the jib is very powerful, fully battened, large sail area, lot of power low down as well, which is giving us a lot of forward drive without either having a lot of hull flying effort or pitching effort by having a low center system. How do we control the jib sheet angle? Which conditions do you let the jib car all the way out on the track versus the midpoint? All right, so on our jib, first one, simplifying it, if this is the clue of the jib, first choice that we have to make is which point do we put the sheet onto the clue? Well, what we want ideally, we have talked about this before, of course, is an even pull on the leech of the sail and the foot of the sail. We want that to be even. So if the jib sheet comes from here, it makes sense that going to the middle hole is halfway between the two, and that's going to give us our even pull on both of those edges. Now, in stronger wind, we want to have slightly less tension in the leech of the sail, so it opens up, allowing us to spill some wind for less power. So if we wanted to do that, then we'd go for the bottom hole, or if you've got 5 holes, 1 hole down from the middle. Would you ever go up? No, you never want to have the leech tighter than the foot. So there we go. That's that story. Then with the self-tacking jib, so if this is our track, there's the mast. What we want to do with the self-tacking jib, with the because what we can do, this is how we can adjust it, is we can limit how far the car on the track. Have I got one in here handy? No, I don't think. Oh, I do think I might have even put it on a boat. Yeah, the car on the self-tacking jib track, you can restrict it so it doesn't just go all the way to the end. So what we don't want to ever do is have that car come in too close to the middle. So generally each class, whether it's Tornado, F18, anything like that, there will be a tuning guide which actually says what the optimal distance from the middle is for different wind strengths. So because most boats which have got a self-tacking jib have also got a Spinnaker, we're not going to change the car position for upwind, downwind. We're going to keep it in the same position except for different wind strengths. But generally what we're looking for with our minimum position, which would be for lighter winds, is so that, how can we draw this? When the mast is in the position which would be if we're sailing on this tack, the mast would be round this way, which means the spreader would come out like this. What we want to make sure is that the leech of the jib sits just outside the spreader. That is, I'm pretty sure with most classes, that is how we're gauging what the minimum is there on the jib car. So if the jib is distorting around the spreader on the mast, perhaps you've got your jib car too close in and you just need to ease it out a little bit. But the danger with having it too close in is it means that our airflow is going to come down like this, hit the back of the sail too square, and then we'll have turbulent airflow on the back of the sail, which is going to really jeopardize our boat speed and pointing ability. So having it closer in isn't necessarily going to make you point higher. And then when are we going to let it out? We're going to let it out as the wind speed increases. So when it's getting really windy and we're really trying to lose power, then we would ease it out to almost all the way. But what I'd be wary of is allowing it to hit the stopper at the end. I would make sure that your line that restricts it doesn't allow it to go that far. There we go. I hope that helps. All right. So who else is on board? We've got Nick in Australia. Congratulations for staying up for this. All right. So Lee says Macon, Georgia is the home of, I think the most notable there is the Ullman brothers. Very nice. All right. So Nick says the AC75 doesn't have a Spinnaker. I think they did use like a code 0, like a big jib for the lighter conditions, just like what we were talking about just there. All right, we've got Laura in Santa Cruz. Hi, great to have you on board. Greg, hello, Greg, says, to the point of never want the leech tighter than the luff. True, even in light winds? Yes. Give me more puff in my jib if I move my Hobie 20 cars forward. That a bad idea? All right. Perhaps. All right. Yeah. There is one type for upwind sailing. You definitely don't want the leech tighter than the foot. Because if the leech is too tight, we're going to get a profile. If we look straight down onto the sail, it's going to be very curved like this. And we're going to hook the leech, which is going to give us terrible airflow. However, if we're sailing downwind, then we used to do it on the Dart 18s, is we're going to push the jib forwards a bit, putting loads of curve into the foot, which is going to give us a bit more juice on the light wind, downwind points of sail. So yes, Greg, you are quite right there. But we're not going to achieve that by changing the position here. In the light winds, we're actually going to grab hold of the sheet or the sail itself and push it forwards to put a bit more curve into the bottom of the sail. All right. Chris, hello. Thanks for tuning in. All right. So Joshua asks, is there a term for the line that restricts the jib cart angle? My Nacra 580 does not have this installed, so I'll need to add a cam cleat to the Spinnaker pole or a cam cleat on the crossbar. Yeah, what I would call this, I'd call it the jib traveler control line, because that is what it's doing there. All right, so back to the preloaded questions, because we have got quite a few. And in fact, at this point, I'm going to take a short commercial break. Thank you. That's for those who are watching later. All right, so this one is from Meanty Boot, who says, I'm from Holland, sailing on the North Sea. When giving it the beans, double trapezing on a beam reach, the waves keep crashing into my foot that is wedged under the rudder. It hurts quite a bit. Yes, I feel your pain. And it also lifts the rudder, making the rudder come up. Do you have advice for people who are sailing in these sort of conditions? Yeah, so yeah, this is actually something that happens even on flat water here with the chop or on the beam reach. So if we're sailing on a beam reach, where the wind is square on to the boat like this, and we're right down in the JOYRIDERTV position, foot under the rudder stock, then on the beam reach, what I find is the boat does get trimmed a little bit further back than on the mine, let's call it the mine shaft point of sail, which is more like down here. Beam reach, mine shaft, like that. On the mine shaft point of sail, because we're going deeper, the wind is pushing the bows down more, which is bringing the back of the boat up a little bit, which is stopping the back foot from getting hit by the waves. So it's actually much more comfortable on this point of sail. But what can you do about it on a beam reach? All that can be suggested is just try to get that hull up a little bit by sheeting in a bit more. It's going to make it a lot more kind of critical, your main sheet control. So this possibly isn't what you want to hear, but your main sheet control is going to be more critical because if you're powering up more to lift the hull, you're going to have to sheet out a bit more with a bit more urgency in the big gusts. The other thing you could do, what we've found here, is having fitted the rubber grip, you can actually sail, if this is the top of the hull at the back, without the rubber grip, your foot, sorry, if you're right at the back, your foot would probably be like that. But with the rubber grip, you could put your back foot a little bit further forwards and have more of your foot over the hull because you've got all that grip there. That's been very nice for us here. So just a suggestion. But and then what about your foot actually popping the rudders up? I would suggest just a shade more tension in the screw on the cam, because if you're kicking the rudder up with your foot, I think you could be allowed to tighten up your cams a little bit more. Okay, in this stage in the game, sorry to say this, but if you could avoid asking any more questions in the live chat, we've been going for nearly 45 minutes and have still got a ton in the preloaded department. So Josh says, and I think this question is in the live chat. All right, could you give me some tip? Sorry, not in the live chat, in the preloaded. Yeah, so, oh, in fact, these next two questions in the preloaded were from Joshua. We've answered the first one about the jib track positions. So this next one, can you give me some tips on how to drill holes on the crossbar to install a Harken cam cleat? Is it as simple as drilling and using a bolt, or are there some steps here for threading the bolt? Yeah, it is pretty much as simple as you would expect. What I would do is you need to get hold of some what Josh is asking here, actually, before we go steaming into it, a cam cleat like this one for controlling it. Nice if you could get one with a fair lead over the top, which will contain the rope. That will make it a lot easier to use. And then position is what you if you haven't got a bowsprit, what you will have to do is have something that centers. There's the mast. Something that centers the line. So what I would do is underneath the bottom of the mast. So if this is the mast here, you'd probably have something like this, and then the beam. I would tie onto the bottom of the mast a small block. So that block would be there, and that's going to center the traveller control line, which means it will go out the same on both sides. And then on your front beam, like this, to put the cleat for that control line at an angle like 45 degrees. So that would be kind of like that. So then the rope would go through the block and then to the traveller car, thus. And then when the traveller car goes to the other side, because of that block, it will go the same distance. Now, to fit one of these, what you need to do is get some self-tapping screws. Oh, Max just appeared. He gave me quite a fright in his Grim Reaper outfit as well, with an Amstel. Oh, man. God, that really...
Amstel or Brutus?
Oh, for me?
Yes, sure.
Amstel.
Amstel, big one?
Amstel every time, guys. I'll just take a small one for now. Thank you very much. Very kind.
Go on.
That's Max from Rosenheim, Germany, who you will have seen in the live chat. Now he's here live.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, so I would go big self-tapping screws. There will be ones that are recommended from Harken. And then you need to use a drill that's slightly smaller than the screw. The beam aluminium is softer than the screw box or stainless steel, so that will thread in to the beam lovely, and that's all you need to do. Easy. All right, it says my connection is unstable, so apologies if I drop out unexpectedly, and we're back with a more stable connection. So Joshua said he does have a Spinnaker pole. So if you've got a Spinnaker pole, then instead of having this block here, all you need is like a fair lead, anything on the Spinnaker pole at all, and then that rope can go through there instead, and then underneath the track to the cleat. Thank you very much. All right, we've got on board Sky Vector Aerial. Thanks for this. Best cat sailing info thing ever. Thanks very much for the vote of confidence. I'm just making it up. Oh, Chris says Amstel or Mythos. It's a fine question. As we know, we're all about the Amstel round here, which incidentally, Amstel in Greece is different to the Amstel you get in other places because it's brewed in Greece. All right, next preloaded question. This is from Pregny Chambersy, who says... yeah. So I won't read out the whole question because it's quite wordy, but the situation we're talking about here is leaving a tricky launching area. So what I'm kind of feeling is he's launching from a marina where he's got a slipway going into the water like this, and then straight away, I don't know if it's like two harbour walls or moored yachts on both sides. You can't just keep that over there. Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh yeah, it's 6:25 in Greece. I think that's fair. Oh, first one of the day is always very special. So, what would you do if you're in this situation? There's only a few options really. Option one would be if it's too tight to actually sail out and put some really good tacks in, then you'd have to basically paddle out. That could be, and I know for a lot of people, that is the only option that you have, is to actually carry a paddle on the boat, paddle out until you're in open water. So I'd say it is worth having a good paddle and paddling out if you're in any doubt about your ability to tack out of the area. And then if there is enough space to tack, what you'd want to do is go as far in one direction as you can, and then just make sure that your tack. This is going to be really great practice for tacking your boat as well, to have to put the tack in there, and then maybe another one here if it's this exact situation. But you want to be tacking in such a way that you're not having to do a 3-point turn. So if it's particularly windy, then maybe the 3-point turn where your boat starts going backwards is going to become necessary. So before you launch, if we're going off this way, maybe the wind's got a little bit of bias to it rather than being completely straight as well. All these things are factors. So walk the boat as far across as possible, so you've got as much of a leg to start off. And then maybe you have to tack here because it might be a bit more of a 3-point turn where you have to back up a bit on your exit like that. Unfortunately, there's no easy answer for this situation. All right, but I hope that helps. Tricky launch there. All right, the next one in the preloaded is from Holger, who says, I just bought my second Hobie 16 and I'm planning to do a week trip through the Danish Sea, hopping from island to island. We will reduce our luggage to a minimum, but still need to take a tent and camping equipment with us. Do you have any tips on where to fasten luggage on a 16, or has anybody got any experience doing such things? So firstly, if you've done a big camping trip on your 16, and this is quite 16 specific because different boats have different things, or if you've done a camping trip on any type of catamaran and you've taken a lot of gear with you, put it in the comments below, not in the live chat, in the comments, so that we can all learn from your experience. I haven't done any camping trips with a 16. So the thing that immediately comes to mind for me is put the gear where it's the furthest away from the water and where you've got a bit of space that isn't going to be too much for pain if it's not going to be in the way too much. So if the boat is here, I would try to get all the gear in quite a long tube, kind of like a mainsail bag, if you like. And then for that bag to be on top of the trampoline, just behind the front beam like this. And then from there, you should have a number of places where you'll be able to tie it. If everything you're putting into that bag can be in dry bags, that is going to be very good. The only downside with this, of course, is going to be it's going to interfere with your jib cleats, but that is going to be a necessary evil for that thing. I think that's the only way you can do it. The only other thing that springs to mind as part two, same sort of long bag, you could put it down the middle of the trampoline. So I'd say those are two options to experiment with to start with and see how you go. All right, next and final preloaded question is from Frank in Ontario, Canada. Of course, sailing the Prindle 15, flying free, sorry. And Frank says, I'm sailing solo on a broad reach, going downwind in 20 knots plus. Boom. That's a lot of wind. 20 knots plus. My objective is to get back to the beach, which is downwind directly ahead of me. Gusts are so strong that my main sheet is always uncleated. How can I get back to my destination and reduce the power so that I don't pitch pole? I was on the trapeze at the back of the boat, but I was feeling overpowered by the wind. How do I reduce speed and still sail in the same direction? This is a tricky one. Reducing the speed is actually going to increase the load in the rig that is making you feel like you're going to pitch pole. What we have here at Wildwind Sailing Holidays is an expression which is speed is your friend. The faster that you go, especially downwind, the less pressure there is trying to force the bows under the water. So here's the wind direction. This is very simple, not accurate. So if the wind is at 20 and 20 knots, let's say, and the boat is doing 10 knots, which is quite slow for that amount of wind strength, then very basically, we're going to have 10 knots of pressure, which is still pushing forwards, trying to get us to pitch pole. Whereas if we're doing 15 knots, then it's going to be 5. If we're doing 20 knots, then it's going to be effectively 0. If we're going faster than the wind, then even less. So going as fast as possible is the key. But if we're not too keen to go as fast as possible, what other things can we do if we're not happy with the situation? Next thing we could do is come in off the trapeze and just sail deeper than the classic catamaran sailor's broad reach, which we talked about at the start of this session. So up to about 25 knots, 30 knots, you should be able to sail on this kind of point of sail, keeping your weight right at the back, and that should work. But you may ask, but what if I turn the boat onto that point of sail and every time I do it, the bows are like, whoa, and all I want to do is go home? Then two options. First is the safe option where you turn your boat, drop the mainsail and come in either just on the jib or, if necessary, if it's that windy, just on the mast. The mast has got enough area to it that if you're going straight downwind into the beach, it will get you in. But if it's that windy, when you drop your mainsail, do be sure to roll it up and tie it to the trampoline so it doesn't fly off, or put it under the tow straps. The other option, which I think I would fancy, would be to turn the boat up into wind like this and then put the rudders up, get to the bow, and then you'll come in backwards. Very nice. And the sails will just be hanging there in the middle like flags. So there we go. That is what I reckon. All right. So thanks very much for your question, Frank. I hope that is of some use. All right. Chris is just coming on that last one. An option for downwind landing is round up and back her down with rudders up. Steer with your jib sitting on the bows. Aha. Just like this guy. Very good. All right. Just going back up to the live chat. Thanks everybody, by the way, for tuning in. It's been an absolute pleasure. As always, and I will be back next week unless something has happened. Who knows what that may be. All right. So Joshua says amazing videos. We love watching Joyrider TV. We're looking forward to putting these tips to work so we can give it the beans. Oh, yes. You can, of course, support Joyrider TV by best two methods, Patreon or heading to totaljoyrider.com. Get yourself a t-shirt or a hoodie. All of the links for those are in the video description, as always. All right, Joshua then says sailors travel 300 miles on expedition races in the Everglades Challenge in Florida. Sorry. Been going for quite a while. All right. Sky Vector Aerial says, I've seen some using a triangle mesh net from front stay to front beam holding camping stuff. Not sexy, but it works. Yeah, so it's just if what Mr. Sky Vector says is if this is the boat back to the camping, you can actually somehow rig up a net to go between the bows. My issue with that is it's going to put the stuff that is on there very close to the water. So see how that works. I think I've seen a bit of that on the extremely popular Sam Holmes sailing channel on YouTube, who's doing a lot of crazy things with quite an old Hobie 16. So that is worth a look. Although I'd say some of his methods there are ever so slightly iffy, to say the least. Joshua says Yeti Panga and Watershed Mississippi duffel bags are excellent bags that are actually waterproof. Perfect. Joe, please repeat the other option. We've lost audio. Oh, if you could just say what options we were talking about at the time, I could do that. Otherwise, there we go. So thanks very much for tuning in once again. And unless Scott Boots in there, I am going to call it a day. Get on to the Amstel. And I hope you all have a lovely weekend. If you're getting out on the water, do give it the beans, of course, if you can, and controlled manner. The best way of going faster is to be in more control. Sort your rudders out. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you. Thank you once again. Thanks.